carry on in the same policy line that you have for supporting the Nicaraguan resistance?
Well, now, Jerry, obviously I do not try to pin him down. He is the president-elect, and he will be the president when he takes over. But I do believe, knowing him and what he and our association together for all these years, I believe that he agrees with me, that the Contras are freedom fighters, and they are trying to achieve democracy in their country, which is now a communist totalitarian government.
Mr. President, you've made a career lately of using an old Russian proverb, trust but verify. But given that verification can never be 100% science, given that there are always a few percentage points where you just can't be sure, do you trust General Secretary Gorbachev for those few points?
Well, as I said, right now, with regard to the INF Treaty, we have worked out verification provisions that are greater than anything that has ever been done before between us. And I think that there is a reasonable chance, a very reasonable chance, that we can continue to have that kind of verification. That one of the first things that I talked over with Mr. Gorbachev in Geneva when we first met was that I said to him, we both didn't have great military well, how did I say it? I put it that we didn't mistrust each other because of our great military. We had our military because we mistrusted each other, and that our negotiations should be aimed at removing the causes of mistrust. And I have to say it's pretty much followed that pattern.
What I want to know is, do you trust Gorbachev?
He hasn't shown me any reason yet that I shouldn't, but again, as I've said, that's why I kept referring to doverye no proverye, trust but verify, and he knows that, and that's they're neither one of us. I don't think that he would gamble on believing that he shouldn't protect his own interests also. Now, I'll come back over.
President, at your meeting with Mr. Gorbachev yesterday, you toasted the things that he and Vice President Bush will accomplish. You spoke this evening about the grave economic crises that Mr. Gorbachev faces. What is the U.S. assessment of his long-term chances for political survival?
Well, I realize, and I think we all should, that he is battling a bureaucracy because whether it's a Russian bureaucracy or one of our own, the first rule of bureaucracy is protect the bureaucracy. And it would mean some great changes for some of the nomenclatura, as they call their bureaucracy there, if he institutes the reforms that he's talking about. But on the plus side for him, it's very evident that the people of the Soviet Union are on his side. They want this this perestroika and this glasnost that he has talked about very much. And I have to believe that the nomenclatura is going to have to think twice with regard to how far they would go in trying to block him when the man in the street over there wants the things that have been seen. Let me go over here for a minute. I've been kind of one-sided.
Mr. President, you could help Mr. Gorbachev with a severe domestic political problem, that is Afghanistan, how to pull out of there with honor. He suggested at the UN yesterday an in-place ceasefire, a cessation of outside military aid. Some people think this would lead to a partition of Afghanistan. What's wrong with that? It would save lives. It would help Mr. Gorbachev.
Well, there's one thing. If we're talking about disarming the Mujahideen, remember that there is still a military force in Afghanistan that was organized by the puppet government established by the Soviet Union. And they are a force that has been fighting along with the Soviet and side by side against the Mujahideen. If you want to get around to disarming both sides, you can't suddenly disarm the Mujahideen and leave them at the mercy of this already military management.
But Mr. Gorbachev proposed at the UN yesterday sending in a UN peacekeeping force just to do this.
Well, you'd have to take up with the UN. This is something rather exceptional that he's asking on that, and I'm not sure that the UN would like that or that the UN is prepared to do such a thing. I think that we've got to recognize that if the Afghan people are going to be able to state and create the government they want, then that puppet government has got to be ready and willing to step down and not have some kind of a compromise thing in which it remains as a government with compromising with the others. Let's let them start from scratch and build the government they want.
Mr. President, let me bring you back to the Middle East. You've got very little time left, and Mr. Arafat of the PLO seems to be inching towards the kind of conditions you and Mr. Schultz have said he should. Is this perhaps not time to go the inch in his direction and start some kind of talks with Mr. Arafat, rather than, as Mr. Schultz did, close the door on him?
No, we've been watching very closely. And for example, we've thought in the last few days that there was a statement that came out of that meeting in Sweden that appeared to be clean-cut and not with the things around the edge that then diffused what seemed to be a pledge. But we had to wait until his press conference and what he said, and I have to say that again, he has left openings for himself where he can deny that he meant this or meant that sounded so clean-cut. It's up to him. We are willing to meet with him and talk with him, and I'm sure the Israelis would be, when once and for all it is clear-cut that he is ready to recognize Israel's right to be a nation, that he is ready to negotiate on behalf of the Palestinian people for a homeland for them, and so forth. And this is all. Now, the thing about George Shultz's decision, I'd like to call to your attention, there is a law passed by the Congress with regard to the conditions for granting a waiver to someone to come in and meet with the United Nations or participate in what they're doing. And there's no way under that law that Mr. Arafat qualifies as yet. And the day that he does, and it is clear-cut, then we could grant that visa. But as I say, he is barred by the terms of that law. And the only way that the Secretary of State has full power under that law, it's his decision to make. And he can only grant a waiver if an individual meets certain requirements, and Arafat doesn't.
Well, to follow up and be just as clear-cut, did he not in his statement say that he accepts the UN articles and that he recognizes Israel? What is the fine line that he hasn't crossed?
What we're still analyzing is then, as he went on, other things in which it's a case, and this has happened before, certainly with the same individual. You could quote to him, oh, you said this, but he's still in a position where he can say, well, yes, but wait a minute, I also said this. And then you find that the second this kind of reduces or nullifies the first this.